Hey everybody and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at calculating area. Now we're going to be doing a multitude of shapes today. We're going to be looking at triangles, rectangles, parallelograms, trapezoids, and then we're also going to be looking at irregular shapes and also composite shapes. Now for each one of these examples that I go through, I'm going to be putting the formula on the left hand side, and then we're going to be working through the practice problems. But before we get going, I just want to go over what our units are going to be. So units are always going to be squared. So what that means is we'll have centimeters squared as our final answer, or meters squared, and so on. So it's always going to have the squared as our final answer. Now for this one here, we have meters, and well, let's just change this. This should be a meter as well. We don't have any conversions that we have to do, but we're going to have meters, and our final answer is going to be meters squared. So the formula that we want to use for calculating for a triangle is area equals base times the height, and then we're dividing it by 2. Now, this triangle here, we have a height of 3 and a base of 12. So I'm just going to put h equals 3 and b equals 12. So if we went to calculate this, we'd have a equals 12 multiplied by 3 and then divide it by 2. Our final answer for area for this triangle would be 18, and it's meters squared. For this triangle here, I'm going to leave for you to complete as your example. Again, you're doing area equals base times the height and divided by 2. So you'd have your height and you'd have your base, and you put those into the formula to calculate. The next shape we're going to go over is a rectangle. The formula for the area is length times width. When we're looking at this one, if we're calculating area equals length times width, we'd have 2.5 multiplied by 3.4. Area would equal 8.5 meters squared. Again, remember your final answer always is squared because you're finding out the area for this. Just like above, I'm going to leave this one for you to answer on your own. Think about it for a square though. If you have to do length times width on a square, all sides are the same. So that means all of these are 7.2 centimeters. So you're going to use that to find your area for the square. For a parallelogram, we're going to be looking at area equals base times height. Now, if we took this portion here and we moved it over here, we would be creating a rectangle. So that's why we can use essentially the same formula that we use for a rectangle. Rectangle is length times width. In this situation, we're using base times height, but we're following the same procedures. So area equals base times height. So our base is 10 and our height is 8. So area equals 80 and our unit is feet squared. For the circle, calculating our area equals pi r squared. Now, when we're looking at this, our circle with just the middle to the outside is our radius. If we were doing all the way across, this would be our diameter. So we always want to use our radius. If we're given our diameter, we're half of that. So you would take your diameter, divide it by 2 to find out your radius. Now that we have a radius, we have a equals pi times r squared. So 4 squared, area equals pi, and then 4 times 4. So area equals 50.3 inches squared. Now, if you don't want to do 4 times 4, you could also just use the squared button on your calculator. The next shape we're looking at here is a trapezoid. Now, the formula that we want to use is area equals A plus B times our height over 2. So what we're going to call A and B is going to be A up here, B down there. They could be flipped. You could call 34 millimeters B and 75 millimeters A. But the important part is you're looking at both of those dimensions that are going to be your A and your B. And then your 12 is going to be your H. So we can now go A equals A plus B, which is 34 plus 75, times our H, which is 12, and then we're dividing this by 2. Following BEDMAS, you want to do the brackets first. So you're going to have 34 plus 75, which is 109, multiplied by 12, divided by 2. This will get us a final answer of 654 millimeters squared. For this one here, we're going to be following the same procedure. So we're using A equals A plus B times our H divided by 2. So for this, 16 I'll call my A, 10 I'll call my B, and 13 will be my H. Now, I'm going to leave this one for you to calculate on your own. So we've gone through all of the different shapes that we need to use. Now, the different shapes are going to always have different formulas, and I know that can be difficult to remember. So when we are doing our test, you will always have a formula sheet provided for you so that you don't have to memorize them perfectly. Now, it is a good thing to start working on memorizing it because it makes learning this a lot easier and a lot more fluent. But for those who are having difficulty with memorizing them, they will be provided for you on the test. For the next question here, it says the area of the shaded region. Now we have two different shapes in here that we're going to have to calculate for. Given a square in a circle with the sides of 12 centimeters, so that means this is 12 centimeters from here to here, and a diameter of a circle, so if we had all the way across the circle, right down the middle, of 17 centimeters, find the area of the shaded region. So we only want to know the shaded area, which means we have to first calculate the circle and all of that shaded area, and then calculate the square, or the square in the middle, and then we're subtracting that from the area of the circle. So the first thing that we need to do is find out what our area of the circle is. Before we do that, I'm going to just write down what we're planning on doing. So the area of the shaded equals the area of the circle subtract the area of the square. Now to calculate the area of the circle, it equals pi r squared. In this example here, we're given our diameter, so the distance all the way across. If our diameter equals 17 centimeters, we need to divide that by 2 to find our radius, so divide it by 2, and our radius equals 8.5 centimeters. So when we're calculating for our circle, we want to use pi multiplied by 8.5 squared. Remember, you always want to do your exponent first because we have to follow the order of operations. So pi times 8.5 squared will get us the area of the circle, which is 226.98 centimeters squared. The next part we need to find is the area of the square, which equals length times width. So our length and width are going to be the same for a square because they're always equal. So we have 12 times 12. So the area of the square equals 144 centimeters squared. Our last thing that we need to do is the area of the shaded equals 226.98 subtract 144 and gets us our final answer of 82.98 centimeters squared. The next thing we're going to be looking at today is an area of an irregular shape. So when the shape is irregular, break it into smaller known shapes. So if we have this shape that they provided for us here, we can break this down so that we imagine that there's a line there, and we can break this into two different shapes. So we're going to have shape 1 and shape 2. We need to also find out the missing dimensions then for this shape. So what we need to do is we need to find out this part here, and we also need to find out this part here and this part here. Well, to find out this part, we know that 15 is all the way across the top, and 8 is that section on the bottom. So if we do 15 subtract 8, we're going to find out that this is 7 yards. So 15 subtract 8 equals 7 yards. Now to find out this portion here, it would be what's remaining, or you could think of this is the exact same on the top. So this is going to be 8 yards. So we no longer need to pay attention to that 15 because we've broken it up. And then the next thing that we need to look at is this last side. Well, if we take 4 plus 6 equals 10, so this is going to be 10 yards for this section here. So now we've broken it up into two different rectangular shapes. If we want to do area for 1 equals length times width, and area for 2 equals length times width. Area for 1, we have 8 by 10, and area for 2, we have 7 by 4. So 8 by 10 gets us 80 yards squared, and 7 by 4 gets us 28 yards squared. The last thing that we need to do is to get the total area. It equals 80 plus 28 yards. So the area equals a total of 108 yards squared. The next part we're going to look at is area of composite shape. So this is going to be made up of more than one shape. In this one here, we have a square on the bottom and we have a triangle on the top. So what we need to do is, if we're finding the area for all of this, we need to break it into two different shapes. So 1 and 2. Now, we already have everything listed to calculate for the area of the square. Now, we also do have everything listed for the triangle. We need to use the 3.4 millimeters as the base of that triangle. So we have to do area of a triangle and area of the square to calculate. So area of the triangle is going to be base times height over 2, and area of the square is going to be length times width. Address the triangle first. If we're using base times height, well, here is our base, here is our height. So we have 3.4 multiplied by 2.6 and divided by 2. If we take 3.4 multiplied by 2.6 and divide it by 2, we get 4.42 millimeters squared. Now we're going to look at the square. So we have 3.4 multiplied by 3.4, because all sides are the same on a square, and we get 11.56 millimeters squared. Last thing we need to do is add area 1 and area 2 together. So we have 4.42 plus 11.56, which gives us a total area of 15.98 millimeters squared. Last composite shape, we have a semicircle, so half of a circle, which we're going to label 1, and we also have a trapezoid, which we're going to label 2, just so we can keep track of which one we're finding first. So if we're going to do the area of the half circle first, we then have to take our area equals pi r squared, and because it's only half of a circle, we're going to be dividing it by 2. Now we take pi multiplied by our radius. Well, they've given us our diameter. We need to divide this by 2, so r equals 10 feet. So we have 10 squared and then divided by 2. So if we take pi multiplied by 10 squared divided by 2, we'll get 157.08 feet squared. And that was area 1. Area 2, we have a trapezoid. So we're using A plus B multiplied by the height and then divided by 2. So A, well, we can look at A is going to be 20 and B is going to be 8 and H is going to be 4 is going to be H. So we have 20 plus 8, close that bracket, multiplied by 4, which is our height, and then we're dividing it by 2. doing inside the bracket first, you have 28 multiplied by 4 and then divided by 2, which gets us 56 feet squared. So area of the total composite shape is going to be adding area 1 and area 2 together, which is 157.08 plus 56 equals 213.08 feet squared. And that's going to be how we calculate for all of the different shapes we're going to be using. Next thing I want you to do is go back and check those blanks that I left for you in the notes to complete on your own. So make sure you go to the class 1 note and double check that you've done them correctly, and then complete your work booklet. That's it for today.